Welcome back to Cancer and Peace. My name is Sean Stewart, and I'm facilitating a conversation with world-renowned author and speaker. Well, I don't know why they're laughing here for Peter Scalzo, my good friend, and I'm here just to help elicit and get all the great words of wisdom out of this man's mind. So he is back to showing a little leg right now, and so that's just to make him feel uncomfortable for our conversation. So he's now fixing it. Okay, he's Jack says he's taken out of the shot. So for those of you who actually do watch online, Jack said he's fixed that, so you won't have to worry about that. But we do like to have a lot of fun, and when we connect, and I think that's part of the journey is just enjoying the relationships and the people around you. And you shared a lot in our last podcast on your journey, Peter, for leaving a legacy, and how you got to, your heart was impacted, how your priorities were changed, and getting to that point in the journey. And so today, I think we wanted to just get to the nitty-gritty details about how to do that. What did you do when you went through that process? What are some things that you would just recommend? Because as bad as it sounds, there are a few people who have been sent home and told to go on hospice who have had the ability to share the after of that, having experienced many years from that moment, and having the opportunity to share that process. And so you're unique in this way. And so I would just love for you to share a lot of that wisdom with people here of your experience, what it is you found really helpful, what are the questions you asked, what are the things that you did, and then just really help our listeners or those who are really following this podcast to, just to walk through that process themselves.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. And our first podcast, I really talked about for this legacy time, I really talked about how I ended up even doing an end-of-life journey. Obviously, I'm here right now, and it's been 6 years. There is a great healing event that happened after this, but at that time in 2017, when I was sent home, I firmly believed, and my doctors firmly believed, that they were sending me home to do an end-of-life journey, which would be about 6 months long. And I think that the issue is, how does somebody like myself, how did I travel through that time? And I think I even go back to the two aspects. I spoke at my church this past weekend, gave a sermon, and it was on endurance. How do we have patience under suffering? And we've talked about endurance before, but there were two aspects, and it was acceptance and purpose. And two characteristics that I need in order to have endurance as I go through the cancer journey. And so last podcast, we talked about purpose, how it's very meaningful to leave a legacy. That provides purpose for me as I go through or went through this end of life journey. But acceptance, in order, I think, to do it and to do it well, acceptance is a key part of it. And what that required was this. I had that teary-eyed doctor, surgeon, oncologist, weeping, and that's it, we're done. And, my brother was there, and he tells me that I said, and this sounds kind of spiritual, but I said to the doctor, Dr. Grasso, you don't have to worry about me. I believe in Jesus Christ, and I know where I'm going. My recollection isn't that great, but that's what my brother said that I said. And at that point, I only would have said it if I firmly believed what I was saying. But when I got home and the reality of this is it struck me, I had to process the sadness and fear, those two issues. It wasn't so much anger, it was more sadness, really.
Right.
Because I was having to say goodbye to my children and my family. And the fear was, what's an end-of-life journey going to feel like? I'm going to have to experience the pain and the suffering and the transition into the afterlife. I'd done it many times with people. Now I was going to have to do it.
So I hear you basically saying, start out with the grief process. Is that because you're
trauma.
Really grief and trauma? Yep. If you don't start with the grief and trauma, you're not going to be able to do this well because you're not going to know your own self. You have to know yourself to be
Right.
able to do this.
And you can't give something that you don't have. So
Right.
if you don't have peace inside, then you can't give it. And I wanted to be able to give a gift to my children, which was, wow, did you see the way Dad did his end of life process?
And I love the fact that you just shared, and yes, you felt sadness and fear and you expressed it. Like saying that you felt
Yeah.
sadness and fear and expressed it. One of the things that for me, it's maybe my pet peeve is when people put on false strength of, oh, everything's great. Put a happy face on this and the bow, and it's just show.
Right.
But you said the real feelings that you had inside of you were sadness and fear, and you actually had to walk through those first.
Yeah. So
first.
I just want to tell how I did it.
Yeah.
The sadness piece was all wrapped up in, and I mentioned this in the podcast before podcast 1 on legacy. One of the care pastors said to me to write a letter to each one of my children. And he said, make sure it comes from the heart. How did you feel when that child was born? How did you feel as they grew up? What would you like them to know as they live out the rest of their lives without you? And the sadness for me in processing it was having to say goodbye to that person, to that child. And so it took me a week to write each letter. I probably cried half the time of writing the letter, but they were like healing tears. They were cleansing and also healing tears. It was, gosh, I'm incredibly sad because I have to say goodbye. And yet God, I give this child into your hands. And now here's what I want to communicate. And just coming up with words and writing it down. There was something about transferring my feeling and thoughts onto paper that was therapeutic for me. Like you said in the other podcast, it wasn't complete. Like I would have loved to have done more, but at the time it was an opportunity. It was a gift because I had that time to do it. And that was, for me, passing was sad because I'm going to miss my loved ones, my family and friends. That's why it was sad. I couldn't think of any other reason why, I wasn't going to miss work.
I was going to ask you last podcast if you missed anything about being a lawyer.
For
versus
me,
you're now doing, I'm going to call it a ministry role. You're actually getting to share your life in this journey with people.
Yeah.
Do you miss legal work as opposed to that?
A lot of men get their identity through their jobs, right? And especially as a lawyer, I mean, I can remember like walking into church and it, wherever, social circles, and it wasn't like, here's Peter. It's like, here's the lawyer. There's something about,
so you liked that world-renowned author and speaker, Peter Scalzo.
There's something, I actually don't, but there's something about being an attorney that people, resonated with them. They found provocative, whatever the word is. So they kind of identified me with that. And I never did. To me, being an attorney was the way for me to bring in money for my family and serve people. I considered it actually a calling. I actually represented a lot of tough situations, a lot of churches, a lot of Christians, all that kind of stuff. But I considered it to be a way to serve people. So leaving the law practice didn't really bother me. But I think the issue was just down to the fact of leaving a legacy for my children.
Well, let me ask a question there just before you, because I know you're going to spend some time talking about that process a bit.
Yeah.
Inside, like if you're a parent and you have, for you 6 kids, I have 3. Yes, I think there's a huge something about we feel about this paternal instincts that are there. What about, how did you choose who needed that communication? I know you're close with your brother, and other members of your family,
Yeah.
how did you think about other, communications? You chose your kids as they're the primary.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, it's a great question.
I guess I do mean to put you on the spot, but I'm interested in how you thought through who got videos and letters and who got, dude, it may not be very long. And I don't know, whatever it is.
No, I think, that's a wonderful question and one I haven't really verbalized, and I'll just say this quickly. My family of origin, we were not vulnerable with each other. Vulnerability was viewed as being weak, and we just did not expose ourselves to each other. So I was not used to the language of vulnerability with my family. Now, right before my mom passed in 2005 from cancer, ovarian cancer, I was not at peace until I wrote her a 4-page letter. And in that letter, I expressed my heart and my tears about why I thought she was the greatest mom on earth. As soon as I handed her that letter, it was like a burden was lifted off of me. So being vulnerable with her was a little bit easier, but
your mom was your safe space.
She was my safe space. Yeah. And, it's not a secret. I am divorced. And in 2000, and this would have been 2017, we were in rough shape. The marriage was in rough shape. And in fact, I think at that point, my wife at the time had taken off to China for like 6 months to do work there. And so we were living like that. And so we didn't have that kind of harmony that you would want. But I still did a letter to her, but it was more in line with my work and recovery because I did an amends letter to her.
Awesome.
I asked for forgiveness and I confessed to her my part in what I felt were my issues that caused a relationship to end.
Yeah.
So I did give her that. And so that was my letter to her. But for my children, it was, as a father, I always felt a strong desire to speak into their lives, not give advice necessarily, but just wherever they had a need to be able to speak into it, to be a safe dad and speak into their lives. And I was going to miss that. I was going to miss being there for graduations, for weddings, for births of grandkids. I was going to miss it. So I wanted to have one opportunity to speak into their lives, and it was one letter. Just as an aside, I still have the sealed letters. I never gave it to them.
They haven't seen the letters.
No, I think, have.
You did videos also. Maybe you're going to talk about that.
Yeah, I'm praying about it, but one day I will give my children those letters.
Wow. So
yeah,
in a sense, the letters were more about your processing
than
it was for them in that sense. You left out a couple. I want to just, if you allow me to, and you can choose, I guess, how vulnerable you want to be in that space. Your mom was your safe space. Your dad was like this Italian, no emotion. How did you communicate with him? And he's a great guy. I know your dad well enough to say that, I have so much respect for him. But he wasn't like this emotional, huggy kind of guy, right? So how did you handle some of those relationships, or even your siblings? What did you do in that space?
They were supportive of me, but I wasn't vulnerable with them because it's not a space that I acted in with them. My dad is a great dad in so many ways. But I never really felt like I could be vulnerable like that with him. And
I want to highlight just
my brother. I can more, but
your dad was key for your faith journey, bringing your whole family into this. So there's no way that, but his level of some of the way emotions and thoughts are things that are things that. As now, you actually understand, like, Italian culture has its own, how men interact in Italian culture in traditional ways versus all of us come from a family of origin, and I love this. Scalzo talks about, well, but how does that line up with your new family of Jesus
Right.
culture and the way he shows these things? And so that's why I was curious how you managed some of the ways you might manage this processing in your family of origin versus now as your family of Jesus, how you
Yeah, I
reconcile
mean,
that.
well, with you guys in recovery, I can't remember about what your relationship was with me at that point, but like Johnny D, I was totally transparent with,
Yeah.
totally transparent with my brothers in recovery because I told them everything anyway, all my sins, everything going on in my life, those guys knew about. So, that's okay. My oldest sister had a really tragic accident in 1980 where she lost a baby and almost died. And she shared some things with me, which were really neat about God speaking to her that she had never shared with me because it was so personal to her.
Wow.
So that was great.
So some doors were open.
Encouraging. Yeah, it was really good. But my siblings are great, supportive and all, but
I know that for
yeah.
I'm more interested in exploring a bit your own processing for how you were thinking in terms of approaching how you're dealing with like your family as a whole. It's a very close family as a in the broad scale, and then you went to those paternal instincts really kicked in, and you really thought about your kids as probably the highest on the list.
And I think that I'm the one getting this diagnosis, and I think some of my family members were in denial of how serious it was. Oh, you'll be good. We'll get another surgery. We'll do this. Everything will be fine. So
turns out you're still studying here. So maybe they were right.
But that's,
what I'm saying.
Yeah, but that's their journey.
Yes.
And but for my journey, I really sat down and said, who do I really want to communicate with? My heart, the deepest recesses of my heart, it was my children. And that's what I set out to do.
I think that's, it seems right and good. One of the things I talked about with you before we did in the first episode, and there was just this idea, and I was listening to a podcast of a couple of younger dads under their 40s, I guess younger to us at least. And they were talking about, they had kids that were in the 11 to 8 range. And what would they hope for from their kids? And at this point, and their comments were something along the lines of, wouldn't it be great if when they were in their 20s or 30s, that they wanted to hang out with us? And so, and when you think about it, it's like what can happen from the formative years is that you can really push a long ways away from your parents because you recognize the imperfections in your family and the distances there, and things are unreconciled, and it just becomes somewhat, I would call it a relationship that has a lot of obligation to it, because family obligation in the sense that you feel like you're in. But you also see examples where, yes, the adult children feel really deeply connected with their parents. And the reason why I raised that was I was thinking about your own journey and where you're at with your children is that they love hanging out with you. I see them, they're over all the time, and
we do trips.
You do trips together, and you guys have just a lot of fun together is what I recognize. And to me, that speaks something. And the reason why I highlight it's not to try to make this, oh, you're the greatest, Peter, but really because I want you to help express some of the things that help those relationships to be where they're at. Because I think this is part of the process is to, what are the things that you think are really helpful for embracing the kind of relationship where your kids really do want to be with you? And I think, and I'm going to say this if it's okay, so I'm not, I'm going to say so, but there's a level of, you don't agree with everything about your kids, their choices or the things that they want to do, but they still all feel so loved and valued. And there's imperfections in your relationship. Yeah. But they still feel loved and valued, I believe.
Yeah. And I think, is there a formula for that? And, but I'll share what I do. But before that, I wanted to just put aside the end of life prognosis that I was dealing with. And, just to say, I forget when this was. I mean, I'm a father of 6 children. They're all adults now. But at some point, I had heard this story of this kindergarten teacher that like wrote this to each student. She gave this letter, like it was a 1 paragraph about them. You're smart, you're creative, you get along with all these things. And they found out, like, as adults, some of them still had these crumpled notes in their wallets or purses. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I remember one Christmas I gave each one of my children, it was nice paper, and I typed it up back when we had typewriters only.
Typewriters.
Yeah, typewriters. That was back in Fred Flintstones.
Dude, you are a boomer.
Yeah. But it was something like, this person is, you are. And I listed characteristics
Our
about
millennial
them.
outside the window is nodding his head at that you are a boomer.
But I listed characteristics about that child. And do you know that years later, a couple of them, they still had it pinned up on their wall, where they had other things.
The importance of words of affirmation.
The importance of words of affirmation. And I think, how often do we as parents do that for a child? So that was just an aside. Now on the other side of the coin, when I was growing up, I took on the performance-driven value that had been drummed in me since I was a little boy. And so I was a performance junkie. And when I came home from work, I wanted to see how everyone was performing. And finally, I loved my kids, of course, loved them. But I was busy. I was a busy attorney, busy in church, busy in all these other places. 6 kids. How do I spend time with each one of them? Some time personal. I took one of my daughters fishing once, and she still talks about it, one time. And I was trying to carve out time in this codependent guys who says yes to everything. I was trying to carve out time. If I could have done it over again, I would have valued each one of my children more and said no to more things outside the home. But when I got into recovery in 2014, the guidelines were drummed into me. First of all, it was about communicating my brokenness, I am me statements. It was about not interrupting. It was about not giving advice, not trying to fix. To listen. You're Sean, you do a great job with the incarnational listening, the active listening. So I love that stuff so much because it made such a difference in my life that I incorporated that into my relationships with my kids. And my kids just felt safe.
This has been the part of your cancer journey and recovery journey that has really sprung into
because they've merged together, the cancer and recovery.
So would you say that your relationships have significantly improved?
Well, my kids tell me that.
Yeah.
They say, Dad, you're so much a better person and father since recovery.
Yeah.
And now they tell me stuff that I don't want to know, but I listen.
I hear you.
And I try to only give them advice when they ask me. I try. That's a toughie, but I try not to fix. I try to let them make their own choices. Okay, I get it. I love you no matter what. And, my kids are all over the map doing all kinds of different things, personally, professionally, everything. So they're living their lives. They are their own people. It's just like in recovery, someone comes in, I'm not going to micromanage their journey or their lives. That's their decision to do that. And with adult children, I do the same thing with them. This is your life.
Just for time purpose, I want to summarize some things I'm hearing. So there's a couple of things that you talked about early on, which that you got in touch with your own sadness and fear.
Mm-hmm.
Then you went to, now you're expressing your own thoughts and feelings. And you, in that process, what I think I'm hearing you say is that your approach wasn't to try to fix or steer or move your kids. You actually went to, I'm going to express my heart.
Right.
And using I am me statements, I'm going to share the real heart of who I am. And the response has been, they're sharing their hearts back to you is what I
Right.
think I hear you saying. And so that is a big part of, I think, what
Yep.
we're asking, or I think what you're demonstrating. And so
Mhm.
from there,
So the capstone that I would say, and I tell cancer patients this a lot, we have the technology today to leave something that'll last. I
mhm,
mean, the shelf life on whatever it is as long as that person stores whatever it is, right? So whether it's done verbally or in writing, but but leaving a message or a life lesson or something, whatever you feel like you want to leave. Like I had my dad who's going to turn 91 in a couple weeks. I encouraged him. He wrote a little book on his life and he did a whole DVD. Someone interviewed him so that when my grandchild wants to know what my dad was like, I can pull out the DVD and say, here he is answering questions about his life. He was born in 1932. He was 13 years old during World War II. He served during the Korean crisis in the Coast Guard. You know what I mean? I can talk about and it's him talking,
yes. Well, I think
him being interviewed.
well, actually, you can do a parody of your dad though pretty well here. So,
I don't know if I can.
yes, I love that.
Maybe.
So they'll know whether you're making this up or not, or if this is real, because I
Yeah.
do love that about modern technology is that you can leave something.
Yeah.
I was thinking, we do credit card receipts here.
Yeah.
And this is so off, but if these things that they print at the gas pump after, a year, they fade and they almost go away. But the thing about modern technology is that you can leave something that is really with the clarity and with expression of who you are in such a way that is like no other time in history. There's an opportunity here to be embraced. And that's something that you did for your kids as you left.
Yeah. So what happened was one of my recovery buddies said, gosh, the Serenity Prayer is so rich. Why don't you go through that and do commentary on the Serenity Prayer as it relates to your life? And I said, that's a great idea because I want my children to know how I faced difficulty, hardships, end of life prognosis, all that. So that's what I did. I did YouTube videos for my kids going through the Serenity Prayer. And I was pleased and happy with that. As it turns out, I mean, a lot of people know the story, but in 2017, I basically had a miracle happen. The only medical option I had available, and we watched tumors disappear, and I've talked about it. And so I kept living, and here I am. I keep living. So now I have a lot of stuff for them to look at. I got a website, book, speeches, everything. So
hours of podcasts so they can listen to your voice for
they would be so bored.
This world famous author.
Yeah, I had one person. I did this whole in 2015 after that surgery, and I had that download, and I wrote the journal, and I read the journal, and my dad had it filmed professionally. Someone came in and filmed me reading the journal. Someone from church came up and said, "Oh, I love your videos that you did. When I can't go to sleep, I turn them on and I listen to them and I go right to sleep." I said, wow, a cure for insomnia. Maybe I should market them that way.
Yeah, I'll put you in touch with Pfizer or somebody to see if we can get some revenue out of this, Peter.
You all probably have noticed that from the tone of my voice. But anyway, so just to say that I think for me personally, as I think through it, it's how can I travel in acceptance first with an end of life prognosis, and then how can I live in purpose, which is to leave a legacy.
I like that a lot. And even for, I'm sure there are many people that listen to this that don't have an end of life prognosis, but hopefully your journey a little bit just gives you some level of refocus on what's important and where do you want to spend those remaining years in time and how do you want to approach it. And so I love some of the things that you shared today. It just, you went into your heart, you felt, you went into your heart and you really thought about who you should communicate to, and you took the time and you invested in that space to do that. And I think there's a lot of questions that you could ask yourself. Any question you thought would just really stuck out the most before we close out that really helped you into process, what you wanted to communicate to those key, relationships?
I think it's, what do I value, and what do I really want my loved ones to know about me? That's a good exercise for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
But that that diagnosis just forced me to do that.
Yeah, it's a great question too. Hey, what's the most important thing that you want to remember from my time, our conversation, this interaction, but in this case, from my life? That's a big.
And you've said it before, like walking through a cemetery. What do you see on the tombstones?
Yeah,
it's always about relationships.
It's a relational interaction. Yeah. Sean had a fast car. Never seen it. So no, that's really good. I appreciate you sharing your story, your life, and just the process you have with your family. I got to probe a little bit into your family life. So thanks for just sharing a lot about with us. And so that's all we're going to have for today. We'll call that a wrap. But you can get more of Peter's resources at cancerandpeace.com. And so we just invite you to go out there, check out his book, and check out some of the resources that we quote and talk about all the time out there. And we'll see you next episode. Thanks a bunch.
Thanks, John. Thanks, everyone.